Hello, everyone. This is the fourth part of this story. If you haven't seen the previous ones, we recommend you watch it first. I turned around quickly, but I had no time to dodge the blow to my head that had stunned me. Something crunched in my skull and a sharp pain pierced my whole body. Then everything swirled before my eyes, and I fell down. I woke up from being dragged with my arms around my armpits. The one dragging me was breathing heavily in the back of my head. He was heavy. I could tell by his voice that he was a man and that he was talking about me. As if through a veil, I realized he wanted to kill me. My reaction was purely instinctive. With a sharp jerk, I twisted around and grabbed my opponent. He stumbled backward in surprise and collapsed on his back. I piled on top of him trying to grab him by the throat. But the stranger quickly came to his senses and punched me in the head right where I'd been hit. I cried out in pain, but my hands gripped my opponent's throat even harder. The man beneath me wheezed. By some incredible effort, he managed to throw his leg up and roll over me. We rolled toward the lake and plunged into the still unfrozen strip of water near the shore. Falling down, my opponent had managed to get above me and was now trying to strangle me. I clenched my fists and punched the man in the ears from both sides. My opponent was distracted for a moment and loosened his grip at that moment. I fumbled for the knife on his belt. I plucked it from its sheath and stabbed the man several times under the ribs. He opened his mouth wide in pain and slowly crawled to his side. I crawled ashore, spitting up and gulping greedily for air. The man was no longer moving. Leaving the man's body lying there, I cautiously made my way toward the house. Putting my hand under my arm, I pulled out my gun. I tried to move as quietly as possible, but I slipped on the stone steps and hit my foot. The pain had a sobering effect on me. I suddenly felt cold. Water was dripping off my wet clothes, turning into icicles in the cold. The light in the house was on and the half-opened door smelled warm. I peered cautiously into the living room. There was a man sitting in a wicker armchair with his back to me in front of the fireplace. To his left, tied to a chair, was Inga. Blood was dripping from her smashed lip onto her blouse. She twitched several times trying to free herself, but the ropes held her tight. "Have you calmed down?" The man was still sitting with his back to me, but his voice sounded familiar. "What a bitch you are." Inga's voice cracked with rage. "You bastard. You ruined my whole life." I could hear the man smirk. "Of course you are, but you like scum, didn't you? That's why you did not think twice and jumped into bed with me. You even got pregnant. You thought you'd tie me to you." The man turned his head and I recognized him. People's artist and playboy. It was your daddy that stopped me from getting what I wanted. But I got my revenge anyway. And you didn't even understand. Playboy poured a glass of cognac. "Do you want some?" "No." Inga groaned with helplessness. "So there, your baby was born alive. It was a girl, strong and healthy." It wasn't hard to make an arrangement with the doctor. A fat stack of bucks and compromising evidence shut him up for good. The girl was immediately bought for her organs. Some married couple. Their baby was dying and they had no choice. The money they paid me was long enough, and they told you the baby was dead. They even gave you a certificate. No. No. You're lying. Inga tried to free herself from the ropes. I've never seen a man scream like that. You don't have to believe it if you don't want to. I told you this because you're doomed. We already finished your lover, and soon you'll join him. There's enough room in the ice hole for all of us. The man took a sip of cognac and raised his gun. I decided to act without Chinese ceremonies. "Stand up. Hands on your head." "The police are working," I yelled in the voice of a drunken nun, commissioned officer standing in front of the recruits. From surprise, The playboy jumped out of his chair, knocked over the bottle of cognac on the table and stared dazedly at me and the gun pointed at him. "Hands behind your head, turn around." I kept yelling like a man on fire. The man obediently raised his hands and turned his back to me. I quickly stepped into the room and hit him on the back of the head with the pistol grip. Yes, Mao T.S. Eaton was right. The rifle gives birth to power. And although I am holding a pistol instead of a rifle, it doesn't change much the essence of the old Chinese communists' winged expression. I untied Inger. She looked at me with dazed eyes, not knowing where she was. Yes. After such a man could go crazy, and here a woman and even a mother. I forcibly poured some brandy into her mouth and laid her on the couch, covering her with my jacket. I sat the playboy's flaxed body in an armchair and tied his hands to the armrests. Then I undressed and hung my clothes on the chair in front of the fireplace, letting them dry for a while. I put a gun on their table to complete the image. Imagine the picture. Me sitting in just my swim trunks in front of a clothed alpha male. A super spectacle. The perverts were drool. I picked up the bottle. There was still cognac at the bottom, and I took a sip straight from the neck. I looked at the playboy. His eyelids twitched a few times. He came to his senses, pretending to be a hose. I patted his cheeks with my gun. "Uncle, stop pretending, you dirty pervert. You've been staring at me for a long time. Nasty." "Where is Nicholas?" the commissioner asked in a weak voice. "Aren't you attracted to my pumped-up body?" I openly mocked him. "Your Nicholas is dead." I threw him a sure so as not to disturb his decomposition. I took another sip of cognac. "Did you kill him?" "I did. Shouldn't I have?" I chuckled drunkenly. "You're finished. You hear finished." The playboy twitched his arms a few times as if he wanted to tear the armrests off. "You'll never get out of here alive. They'll just shoot you for murder." I looked at the twitching alpha male and I thought I saw foam coming out of his mouth and smoke coming out of his ass. "I don't think it will come to that if you tell me everything." I got up slowly from the table. "Who do you think you are?" The playboy twitched his arms again. "If you remember, I used to be in the intelligence service. That's one thing we learned, but we were trained to untie our tongues." I kicked him in the teeth with the handle of my pistol for a start. He coughed and spat out some teeth with blood. "That's okay. As an honorary alpha male, the dentist will put in new ones at a big discount." After an hour of a bit of hilarious interrogation, I knew everything, including the role of Valentina, the maid. It was she who warned the playboy that the mistress is going out of town. Inga, as a banker, was well aware of the machinations of her ex. In the near future, she was going to give him dirt on the police. This caused a quick and harsh reaction. "Playboy. It's easier and cheaper to eliminate a dangerous man than to negotiate with him." My clothes dried up a little and I got dressed. Then I pulled out my cell phone and called the police. It was 3:30 in the morning when a patrol car pulled up to the house, lighting up the area with its red and blue flashing beacon. Accompanied by the police, we drove back into town. The showdown lasted almost 2 days. At last, they left us alone, limiting us to an undertaking not to leave the city. What really helped was the recording of the playboy's conversation with Inger and me, which I had managed to make on my cell phone. Inger didn't show up for work for a week. It was scary to look at her. She cried all the time. I tried to keep an eye on her, afraid she might do something to herself. The police made a sluggish check of the maternity hospital, but they found no trace of the abducted girl. The DOP was dead. The staff had long since resigned or retired. In the end, the investigation came to a standstill. 2 months passed after our unsuccessful trip out of town. Inger went to work. I was staying with her. Nothing had changed in our relationship. She was coldly polite to me no more. Ahead of me loomed a session and, in the evenings, I leafed through my textbooks. One late March evening, my son called me. Daddy. Congratulations. You're about to become a grandfather. Natasha's pregnant. I couldn't hide my joy. Yes, Daddy, 4 months pregnant. And you didn't say anything until now. I was afraid of jinxing you. Did you call your mother? The son was silent, only a sniffle in the tube. Call your mother. She has always loved you, maybe even more than me. I remembered Inger's tragedy. Listen to me, call my son. More? I don't think so. All right, I will. A week later, called and said that he was going to come visit. I asked the landlady for 3 days off to be with my son and daughter-in-law. And where are they going to stay? Asked me India the next day. They will take a room in a hotel. I do not have my own place. Why so? Michelle did not leave. What a miser. Inger teased me. I didn't say anything. Invite them to my place. The house is big. There is enough room for all. At least I'll talk to young people in my old age. Inga pretended to sigh. I furtively looked at her. Inga has not provoked me all this, but I knew that this is just a lull and eventually I will not resist and dive under her blankets. In the morning, I met the children at the airport. It took us an hour and a half to get to Inger's house. Daddy, is it comfortable? Was worried. Living with a total stranger? He looked at me slyly. Or is there something between you? Stop interrogating Dad. Natasha smiled. When we get there, we'll see for ourselves. I could see her face clearly in the mirror. I felt like I was struck by lightning. This is too fantastic to be true. What if it is true? I looked at Natasha again. I stopped in front of the front door. I pulled my things out of the trunk and carried them into the spacious hallway. The children entered the house, curiously looking at the rich furnishings. Come, make yourselves comfortable. A smiling Inga came down the stairs to us. Feel as before. She did not finish speaking, but stared at Natasha, pressing her hands convulsively to her breast. My God. It cannot be. It cannot be. My baby. My baby. She spoke softly. Inga began to slowly settle on the steps. I barely had time to catch her. Help. I shouted at the bewildered son. We moved the woman on the sofa. Grandma Moshe, who jumped out to hear the noise, brought a glass of water. Natasha stood and silently looked at India. Then she looked at me in confusion. Natasha. It looks like your mother. I smiled. The young woman slowly sank to the floor. What's going on here? Michelle's frightened voice came through the door. What happened next? Everything is fine. Natasha really turned out to be Inga's missing daughter. We don't know for what reason the people who had bought her had abandoned their plans and put the child in a home. Michelle and Ing very quickly stepped into the role of grandmothers. Natasha gave birth to a healthy baby girl who was named Victoria. As you may have guessed, forgave his mother. He and Natasha moved in with Inger, and the previously dull house was filled with the babbling of an infant. Michelle left Shamsky after a month and took my last name. Perhaps she still hoped for something. Inger didn't give up hope either. Only I did not know all this, but to tell you the truth, and did not want to know. The fast train was carrying me to the northeast of a vast country with the rattle of the train wheels. The May sun was slowly rising over the horizon. The blossoming rowan tree smelled refreshingly spicy. Mountain ash blossoms a little later here than in the middle belt. Petals of bird cherry blossoms slowly swirled in the transparent air. I walked on the spring ground. A warm breeze gently swayed the grass. Juicy aspens and young birches were basking in the gentle rays of the morning sun. I deeply inhaled the fragrance of the flowers. At last, I was free. It was morning. The morning of a happy man. Dear